Okay, so the next one is for the mayor. What is your plan to increase the sustainability of Ann Arbor by sustaining the stadium bridge, which is falling down?
I'll be over there later with a jack, working on it. Well, it is, in another age, we would have had federal or state funding for it, but just as we did with the Broadway bridges, that was state funding. And what the problem is now in Michigan, that there is no money. But the city has been very reluctant. We have a plan where if we have to replace the bridge on our own, we'll do it. But what's happened over the years is that most road repairs are actually done with funding that comes from the state and is brought back down to the locals. That money, as you can imagine, has been drying up pretty rapidly over the last few years. And we are very hopeful that we'll be able to get federal money to fix the bridges, so to replace them. But the problem has been we could choose to spend all of our local road money, which is all allocated right now, or we could go ahead and hope and wait for some federal money. Because we won't be able to get, if you build the bridge, you can't then get the federal money. So we have kind of a full court press. We're quite hopeful. We have our own congressman working on it very hard. Also the congressman to the west of us, Mark Schauer, who's doing a great job with us. Both of our senators are signed on. So we're hopeful that we're going to be able to come up with the funds to do that. But again, if we can't, we will have to spend local money, but that's going to impact local road repair throughout the city, and there's already a great deal of work to do there.
The next question is for Tom. Can we be self-sustaining when trillions of tax dollars go to failing banks in secret? If not, is it possible to stop this?
I'm not sure who we is in this question. If we as a, and maybe the questioner can enlighten me on this, is we as a community, we as a country, yeah.
I was thinking our community, but you could say the whole nation.
Yeah, so it could be either. I mean, I don't think any community can be completely self-sustaining. I mean, as I suggested earlier, in dealing with recovery from the crisis as well as transformation towards a much more sustainable way of living, we're going to depend to some extent on what's done by the higher-ups in Washington, in Lansing, and we're also going to depend on what's done at the grassroots here in local communities. So I think self-sustaining is probably the wrong model to think about. Some communities which happen to have a lot of natural resources with which they could meet all of their own needs might do fine, but many other communities simply don't have the local resources to be able to develop a locally self-sustaining economy. So to some extent we will continue to be interdependent with other communities, and we will be part of a nation that will have to undertake policies that are complementary to efforts to become more self-sustaining at the local level. So I think that's the first important point, that there's got to be a kind of complementary relationship between policy at higher levels and local efforts to make communities more self-sufficient, but not completely self-sufficient. Then you also raised the question about the financial bailouts and the expenditures that are made by not so much by both by the federal government and then by the Treasury and the FDIC and all of the financial institutions to support the banks. There's certainly been a lot of money wasted in the effort to deal with the financial crisis, and there's been a lot of money that's gone into the pockets of a lot of rich people. Much of that money actually went into their pockets before the crisis hit. They kind of got out before the roof fell in. And I think we ought to be outraged that so many people have profited over the crisis or before the crisis hit, and the rest of us are left to clean up the mess. At the same time, though, I don't think we had any alternative. It was a choice between a very bad and a truly horrible situation. We had to keep the banks afloat, or else things would have gotten a whole lot worse. And I think there's some encouragement to be seen in the fact that some of those who've received bailout money are beginning to pay some of it back. The government has been able to make some money and reduce the losses that have to be borne by taxpayers. So I guess in terms of the financial crisis and the bailout money, it's a bad scene. We've all had to pay for a crisis that was set into motion by a few people who haven't had to pay very much. But I think the alternative to the government injecting a substantial amount of money into the financial sector would have been even worse for all of us. And we can only hope that things are going to turn around sufficiently so that some of the money that we've put into the banks and the financial sector will come back to the government, and we won't all end up with much higher tax bills. So I'm not sure this really answers your two questions, but that's the way I look at it. There would have been a lot better way to deal with the crisis, but I think it would have been hard to avoid massive government intervention to turn things around. In fact, I think we needed more of it. The government needed to spend more on the stimulus, and it needed to do more to rescue banks while preventing them from just sitting on the money or wasting it. We needed actually more than we got, and we just need to hope that what the government has actually put in is going to be sufficient to turn things around. It was just a bad situation from which there was no good exit.
Okay, so this one's for Jeff. It says, how about education about food choices so people understand cost and bring the price down as people become more invested in what they eat and where it comes from? Can you speak to some of the efforts that are going on around that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think this is an opportunity to educate ourselves and to share ideas. I think the biggest challenge is these financial incentives that are in place. In some ways, we are trying to educate people to act against their own interest, to buy the cheapest calories they can to feed themselves. So I don't know that education is the most direct way we can have the biggest impact. I think changing some policies that we have, and maybe educating people so that there is a push from people to have this change is where education fits into that. There was a question just a minute ago about the connection between the war industry and health. And I thought at that moment how, I'll go a little bit out on my left wing here to answer this the way I see it, but to tie food into that equation as well, that we aren't taxing and really paying for the cost of those wars. Those wars, to a great degree, are to secure the oil supply, that we're not taxing to the effect it takes to actually secure that. Taxing that would would make it harder to transport this food from all different places, and it would drive the economy toward having local food. Local food would help us stay healthy. And so all these things are tied in, and these are big national policies that are really hard to work against in little pieces here at the local level. So I think that's the biggest piece, is really looking at what are the unintended consequences of all these things we've put into place, and what policies can we work toward that are going to have the consequences and the outcomes that we want to have.